Hi everyone, Mike again with MEG Motors. Today we're going to be working on this Ryobi line trimmer. This is one of 8 pieces I got from the same guy. I got 8 pieces for $80. So I have about $10 invested so far. I'm assuming it doesn't run. It actually looks not that bad. The fuel lines are intact and they're even fairly soft, but the primer bulb has split open, so we don't have any way to prime it. And I noticed that the collar for the expanded system, where you normally would tighten that down to hold the attachment on, I noticed that's missing. So we're gonna have to look around and see if we can find one of those. But before we do any of that, we wanna make sure that we can make it run. And so we know we need 3 things to make it run. We need spark, and the spark has to occur at the right time. We need compression, and we need fuel. And I pulled this one through. It feels like it has plenty of compression. Like I said, the primer bulb is split, so we know we're gonna have to work on the carburetor. But we're gonna spray a little spray in the intake. This is our standard start on spray test. If we can get it to pop off on spray, then we know that we have compression, we have spark, and spark at the right time, and we can start working on the fuel system. So let's run that test first and see if we can get it to pop off. So I'm gonna go full throttle and the choke open, and I'm gonna spray a little spray in there. And on this one doesn't have a traditional choke like most carburetors have, where it has a butterfly valve that closes and chokes off the airflow. This one, the choke lever is really just, it sets a speed, it sets it like a fast idle. And the instructions on this one say not to hold the throttle open when you start it. So we're gonna try to start it without holding the throttle open. But if it doesn't start, we'll go wide open and we'll try it again. So let's see what happens when we try to start it. All right, well, there it goes. It popped off okay. So that alone is enough to tell us that we have spark and spark at the right time, and we have compression. It sounded really loud, so I'm kind of wondering if we maybe have a muffler issue going on, but we know that we have compression, we have ignition, so we're in good shape there. We're gonna pull the carburetor off, and we're gonna take a look at that muffler and see why that was so loud, and then we'll go from there. So let me reset the camera and we'll get started. All right, so we're gonna get the carburetor off of this one. We have 2 nuts. Hold this on right here. It should loosen up our air filter cover. Well, it doesn't seem to want to come off. There we go. All right, and then here's our fuel lines. Like I said, they don't feel that bad. They're still relatively soft and flexible. But they don't fit that tight in the tank right here, and so we're probably going to replace them anyway, just to make sure that they don't leak. All right, and so then our carburetor should come off, and we'll disconnect our throttle cable. And so there's our carburetor. Like I said, a traditional carburetor would have a butterfly valve right there for the choke, but this one doesn't have one. The choke lever just gives it a little throttle to help with the startup. So we're gonna clean this up a little bit, and then we're gonna open it up and see what's going on inside. You can see our primer bulb is falling apart. So we'll put a new primer on it and see what else it might need inside. So let me reset and we'll be right back. Okay, so here's our carburetor. This one is a Zama. I don't know if you can see that right there. It's a Zama brand. It's typically either Zama or Walbro are the 2 main carburetors. So it has two main parts. It has a fuel pump. This side of the carburetor over here is a fuel pump, and it has a metering chamber. And so the metering chamber takes the place of a traditional float bowl. Because these have to be able to operate in lots of different positions, a float bowl won't work. A float bowl only works when it's right side up, flat and level, pretty close anyway. So float bowl wouldn't work like a line trimmer or a chainsaw or any of those. So we use these diaphragm style carburetors that can operate in any attitude. And so we know we have to take this plate off to replace this primer bulb. So let's go ahead and take that off first. And we'll take a look at the fuel pump. We don't see a lot of trouble with the fuel pump, although that doesn't mean that there can't be any trouble. We just don't see too much. The material that they use to make the fuel pump typically isn't affected by the gas like the metering diagram is. So there's our primer bulb with a big hole in it. Yeah, it's got to be replaced. And so here's our fuel pump diaphragm. And so there's a couple of main parts to this. There's the diaphragm itself, the fuel pump diaphragm, which I believe on this carburetor is going to be this diaphragm right here. So this diaphragm works in conjunction with these two flaps right here to pump fuel out of the tank and present it to the carburetor. When you look in these carburetors, there's a lot of different models, and then Walbro and Zama, they all have a bunch of different models. And so the shape and the layout of the fuel pump might be a little bit different. This is a relatively odd shaped one, but the same criteria applies. There can't be any rips or tears in this diaphragm or this membrane. And these two flaps right here that act as check valves or one-way valves, they have to be soft, flexible, and intact. If they're broke off or missing, then the fuel pump won't work. And so in this carburetor, like these membranes, they'll sit on top of these two holes right here. These two holes right here and right here. And so they will allow fuel to come up this way, but not back the other way. And so this line is connected to the pickup in the tank. And as the engine pumps fuel, it'll allow fuel to come up here and be pushed, but not be pushed back to the tank. And then on this one, this is where the fuel comes out from the fuel pump and gets presented to the carburetor for use by the engine. And this valve prevents the fuel from being pushed back out of the carburetor. And so both of those have to be in place. And these look fine. This hole right here is the hole that I was talking about that provides the pulses from the crankcase. So this lines up with another hole on the intake manifold and will provide the intake pulses to the back side of this diaphragm. And so yeah, that all looks good. This screen is dirty. That's like a filter screen. You can see all that dirt right there. It's doing its job. There shouldn't be a lot of dirt in here if the filter in the tank is in place and working like it should. So we may have trouble inside the tank. But all right, so let's take the metering chamber apart and see what's going on over there. This is where we see most of the trouble. Yeah. And so this is actually two pieces. It's a gasket and the metering diaphragm. And this diaphragm should be very soft and flexible, and it's not. It's very, I don't know if you can hear that, but it's very stiff, and it won't work that way. So that diaphragm works in conjunction with this lever and this needle. So as the engine, normally this is full of fuel, and as the engine draws fuel out of here, it'll pull that diaphragm down until it hits this lever, which will unseat this needle and allow fuel to flow back into this chamber. And as the chamber fills with fuel, the diaphragm will come up off the lever and allow the needle to seat to stop it from flooding. And so if this diaphragm can't move, It's either gonna flood the engine because it's holding the needle open all the time, or it's gonna starve the engine for fuel. So yeah, it's a very common problem. We see that a lot. All right, we're gonna take the needle off as well. And this is spring loaded, so you wanna hold your finger over this when you do this. And so we're gonna look at our needle, and we're looking to see how dirty it is. And it's not too bad. I've seen worse. Got a little bit of stuff on it. But we'll clean that up when we get ready to put this back together. So we're going to pull a new diaphragm and a new primer bulb out of our parts bin. And we'll see if we can clean this up a little bit more and put it back together. Okay, here we are. We got some new parts for our carburetor. We got a new primer bulb. So that'll be good. And we got a new diaphragm. And as you can see, this one is very soft. See how it peels right away from the metal disc? Yeah, this one doesn't want to do that. It will peel away, but I can tell you it's really, really stiff. So we're going to start putting this one back together. And we're going to use a technique that was suggested by a viewer. His complaint was that he had really big fingers. And so when it comes time to put this little spring in, you have to be very careful, because if that spring goes flying, you'll probably never find it. And so he suggested that you put a little grease in the recess where the spring goes to help hold it in place while you work on the carburetor. And that grease won't hurt anything, because as soon as the carburetor fills with fuel, it's going to dissolve the grease and it'll be fine. So we did that. We're going to put our needle in, and then on the lever, you'll see it's got a little dimple in it. The spring should fit around that dimple on the underside. So we're going to set this on the spring first, and then we're going to slide it back and work it under the needle. Here we go. And then we'll put our set screw back in, our retainer screw. And then it's always good to check the height of the lever. That's another adjustment that can affect the way these things run. Too high or too low can impact it running too rich or too lean. And so I have this gauge from Zama, and I can look on this carburetor and I can see that it is a C1U. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. And so I look on the gauge until I see where it also says C1U right there. So that means that we should use this edge of the gauge, and if it's all adjusted correctly, as soon as we set it across there, the lever should barely touch the gauge. So this one looks really good. So we're going to continue with the reassembly. We're going to put our gasket on, and we'll put our new metering diaphragm in, set the cover in place. Get our screws installed. All right, then on the fuel pump side, I've cleaned the screen. And so we're just gonna put this all back together. Didn't really make any changes over there. Our new primer bulb and our retainer plate. All right, that pretty much completes our carburetor overhaul. We can hear it pumping air, which is a good sign. So yeah, we'll put a couple of fuel lines on there, and then we'll put this carburetor back on and see if we can get it to run. All right, so here's our fuel lines. As you can see, they're still somewhat flexible. Certainly not the worst I've ever felt, but I found an interesting thing when I looked inside the tank. If you look inside, you can see the fuel lines are broken inside the tank. The pickup line is laying in the bottom of the tank, and there's the fuel pickup. And so, yeah, there's no way this would have run. So we're gonna work on putting some new lines on this one. I'm gonna try to just pull this line out. This is the return line. That was plenty long for a return line, but got that one out. And then this one, I don't know if this one's gonna pull out either. Oh yeah, there it goes. So this was our fuel pickup line. And so the other pieces of it are inside the tank. And so I'm gonna have to work on putting some new lines on this one. I'm gonna take just a minute to clean out the inside of the tank, and then we'll be right back and work on putting some lines on this. Okay, so we're gonna work on putting some fuel lines on this trimmer. By the way, this is what came out of the tank. These are all the broken fuel lines, and this is the fuel pickup, which is looking pretty suspect. So I pulled a new one out of my spare parts. So we got to put in two fuel lines. One is a pickup line that the engine will use to draw fuel from the tank, and one is a return line that pushes fuel back into the tank when we press the primer. And I have this tool. This is what I use. So it has a ring on one end to pull, and it has a long rod with a hook on the other end. And I can stick this in the tank and hook a fuel line on there and pull it back. And when I was first doing these, I didn't have this tool, and so you had to be creative and improvise. I made them out of a safety wire or anything that you've got that you can use to attach to the fuel line and pull it back through the tank can be used. This tool makes it easy, but it can be done without this tool. I did many fuel lines without this tool. So I'm going to go ahead and stick the tool in this first hole. And this tool, even this tool, is just barely long enough. I'm going to put it in there, and then we're going to pull it out the far end here. Just like that. And then we're going to take our fuel line, and we're going to cut a taper in the end. That makes it easier to get it to go into the fuel tank. And then we're going to take a sharp tool, and we're going to poke a hole in that line. Just like that. And then we're going to work that fuel line onto the tool. Sometimes that can be the hardest part. I'm not sure why that's so difficult, but there we go. So there's our fuel line. Hopefully you can see that. Our fuel line is on the tool. And so we're gonna put a little lubricant on the line to help it pull up into the tank. Then we're gonna pull our tool back. When we pull it up out of the tank, it should bring the fuel line with it, just like that. And so we're going to use this one and we're going to use this one as the return line. And so the return line barely needs to go into the tank. It just has to just get into the surface. So we're going to pull most of this line all the way through. I'm going to watch it inside. And once it's there, we're going to cut it off. And then we're going to repeat that process for the fuel pickup line. So we cut a taper, poke a hole, going to install our tool. It's going to be even a little further away this time. And then we're going to put our fuel line on the tool. A little lubricant on the tool. Let's see if we can do 2 for 2. Sometimes the tool will pull out of the fuel line and break it off. So on this end, we're going to cut our line off square, and then we're going to attempt to put this fuel pickup on there, although it looks like it might be too big. Let's see if we can get the fuel line to go on that one. Yeah, that one's not going to work. I'm going to have to get a different pickup. All right, so I've got a different one with a slightly smaller barb. We're going to see if we can get this. Yeah, that one went right on. All right, so now we're just going to pull our pickup line through the tank until we get the pickup where we want it inside the tank. There's a little recess in there. Yeah, and so there's our 2 fuel lines in place. So with the fuel lines in place, we can put the carburetor back on. And so we know that this line is the exit line. I can cover it and push on the bulb, and when I let my finger up, I can hear a push. So I know that's the return line. So this is going to be the intake line. So we're going to put our carburetor on. Going to connect our throttle. Slide the carburetor on. I don't think we put that in the right place. So the throttle has multiple places where the throttle cable can be installed. Just trying to get it in the place that gives us full throttle when we pull the trigger. Oh, looks good. All right, so we know this is our return line. Oh my, I hope I didn't cut that too short. I think I probably did. Let me see how much I can get out of there. Yeah, maybe not. All right, and then we're gonna put this line on. We're gonna cut it off just the same. Cut that one off just a little bit more. All right, and then we'll put our air filter housing back on. With our 2 nuts. All right, so that's new fuel lines, new primer bulb, new diaphragm in the carburetor. I think we're ready to put some gas in this one. We'll run a test to make sure that it pumps fuel with the primer, and then we'll see if we can get it to run. So give me a second to grab some fuel, and we'll be right back. All right, with some gas in the tank, we're going to pump the primer, and hopefully we're going to see fuel come up this line, fill up the primer bulb, and then go back down this line. So let's see what happens. Now, I saw fuel come up. I don't know if you saw that. It went really fast. Then we have fuel in the bulb and fuel going back down the return line. So yeah, we're ready to see if we can make this one run. I'm going to reset the camera and we'll see what happens. Okay, so we're ready to see if we can make this one run. I've got my carburetor adjustment tools out. I got a regular Phillips screwdriver to adjust the idle speed. And then the mixture needles on this one are the double D shape. So I've got the right tool for that. So we're gonna see if we can get this one to start. Per the instructions, it says don't squeeze the trigger, just set the lever to start, which gives it a little bit of throttle. And so, yeah, let's see what happens. So you can hear that it runs, but it doesn't run that well. It sounds like both mixtures are lean. The idle is doesn't sound right. Typically it'll be a smoother, more consistent idle. It sounds really lean, and the top end sounds lean. So I'm going to open both screws just a touch, and then we're going to restart and see if we can make it run. My mistake. I hadn't reset the fast idle yet. Let's try that again. I've backed the idle off so far, now it won't idle. Yeah, so that's what I like to see. It sounds pretty good right now. Took a little tinkering with the low speed mixture needle to get it just right. I like to have the low speed a little on the rich side. Makes it easier to start and gets rid of any hesitation coming off of idle. But it sounds good now, and it starts easy, especially after it's been running. It should start relatively easy. Just like that, that's what I like to see. So yeah, I think we're gonna call this one fixed. Hope you liked the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. I hope this can encourages you to get out and maybe try working on your own. You can always leave me comments if you like. If you're working on one and you're having trouble, I'll help you if I can. But yeah, get out there and try. It doesn't hurt anything to try, and you might save yourself the cost of buying a new one. So yeah, if you like the video, please like and subscribe, and stay tuned. There'll be more videos coming, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.